agus fáilte go trí seascad den program ag BBC Alba ha dul go crea scíalch an bhór ich ingantach an is sil spórs na Alba. So Iona Ballantyne agus an bhí tollaigh sé ra bhil cliciad ar hópar na Màthar Leanne Crichton choileadh in studio. Our program na heiche noch, cluiche sin barach fólaí an man ghluasad go Tobar na Màthar agus fér sin súlar cuide na naidheachdan eile leis an SWPL a tílach in ceann becan theachtainin. A Zoe Ogilvie bruidhinn hópar mar a chéad fór noch ball-coise Obar-Dheathain agus cluiche sin mar ha sil bhana-stiùiriche Shebahn Aherne agus Ruesha Littlejohn a sin beo tíimiceil spórs. Leanne, welcome back to 360.
Thank you.
Now, you're sitting here no longer as a Glasgow City player, so much has changed recently. You are now, like we just said, with Motherwell, a player and a coach. That's quite a big move considering you had 3 spells with Glasgow City over 8 years with them. How does it feel to be with Motherwell?
Yeah, strange probably in the beginning anyway. I think the schedule's been pretty hectic and full on both on the pitch and off since I've kind of transferred over, so no, it took a while to get used to the thought of not spending so much time with the same group of people, and obviously it was more, you know, at Glasgow City it was like a family and really close friends. I'd spent so much time there, and the thought of that was tough, but you know, once you're gone I don't think it takes you too long to move on, and certainly there's been enough to keep me busy, and my focus is well and truly on the season ahead, but I've enjoyed it so far. There's been lots of challenges, and we kind of knew that would be the case when we took over, but at the same time it's motivating me to be better all the time.
And how did the move come about in the first place? Did you know whilst you were still playing with Glasgow City that it kind of might be your last couple of games with them?
Not completely. I think there was always a thought process going on, in the sense that over the course of the season I was probably evaluating where I was at in life and in football as well. I think you need to do that as you get older, and especially the fact that I have other work commitments and study commitments. So I'm always open-minded to the idea that things might not last forever. I spoke to Paul Brownlee. We have a good relationship. We worked together previously at the national team, and he had always mentioned that, you know, if he went into a job in coaching, that he would like me to be part of that, and that conversation developed as the season came to an end. And when that came about, it almost felt like the timing was probably perfect for me, because I knew in my mind that there was a decision that had to be made. I loved the season, you know, with Glasgow City last year, but I never played as much on the pitch as I would have wanted to. I continued to dedicate that amount of time, and I just felt that maybe moving forward that was going to be the case. And for me, I always wanted my time at Glasgow City to end on a high, and a time that I enjoyed and loved, and I managed to do that, and the opportunity presented itself, and it was a no-brainer. And
it did end on a high, 14-time
Yes.
champions. So even lifting the trophy in June, you didn't know then that was kind of your last game, your last time with Glasgow City?
No, I think football's like that. You know, you can have your mind set in something, and you believe that that's what's going to happen, and things can change really quickly. So I just made sure that in those last few months of the season that I enjoyed it as best I could, and really enjoyed the quality time that I had with those players, with the coaching staff, with the management team, and everybody behind the scenes that does an incredible job. But at the back of my mind I always knew that it could be the end, but it didn't stop me enjoying it and giving everything that I had. And when the decision came and the conversation came with both clubs, that they finally agreed that it would be a decision that could happen, and they were both comfortable with it, then, you know, it all worked out in the end.
And a big job ahead with the Motherwell.
Yes.
There's a lot to kind of contend with in terms of, actually you're now no longer with a full-time professional team. How do you manage that? What do you need to do with Motherwell? Is it a kind of, I don't want to say a rebuild, but is it kind of a rebuild?
Yeah, I think so. For us it feels that way. You know, I think there was certain things in place that we will continue forward. Immediately when Paul took over at the club, there was a bit of a clear out in terms of the staff and personnel that had been there last season, and I think that's, you know, often required at any sort of time, especially in sport. You know, certain people will move on. We've managed to bring in some of our own players. Paul obviously brought in his own staff, which has been incredible. So the staff group is really strong with Paul, myself, Craig Slater, our other assistant, and Conor O'Boyle, who's a goalkeeping coach. So there was fresh changes right from the offset, on and off the pitch. I think there's loads of potential for development, and that's the vision that we've got. As you mentioned, last season was a tough season, so we need to become a team that when we step out onto that pitch, we really believe that we can go and achieve things. And so far the message has been relayed to the team, and every player has bought into that, which has been incredible. That's probably the thing that has impressed me the most at the club, is that players that maybe have not seen those demands before, and the players that perhaps have had a taste of it, have pulled together you know, a hell of a lot and are really driving in the one direction.
Well, like you say, Leanne, 4 wins across the season, although 78 goals conceded. Now, Motherwell did have their first competitive match last weekend against Rangers in the SWPL Cup. It was a 5-0 defeat, but even then you have had time with the squad. Are you starting to see changes and kind of what you've been implementing?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Sunday probably came a couple of weeks too soon for us.
A hard opening game as well.
It was, and we were probably unfortunate that a couple of the players that we recruited carried over suspensions from last season, and we had another couple within the squad that carried over suspensions as well, so the squad was hugely depleted. But not to take anything away from the performance and the players that were on the pitch, we knew it was going to be a tough ask against a really talented Rangers side with huge ambitions this season as well. So we knew that they would treat us with that respect, and that they would come and look to win the match convincingly. But the buy-in from the players was exceptional. I think fitness levels, we can see a huge difference in that already. And probably even at half-time, you know, we're 3-0 down, but when we spoke to the players and we asked them to give us a bit more and just be brave, you know, we want them to express themselves, we want them to play a style of football that's enjoyable. We don't want to be that team that just continually give the ball away and just face relentless counter-attacks and those types of, you know, playing styles that we'll come up against with the top teams in terms of Glasgow City, Rangers and Celtic. But we're in a good place. You know, I think over the next couple of weeks we'll really see how far we've come, and we've got a couple of games, you know, in the not too distant future that will be a realistic aim of picking up points and producing good performances. Well,
it does sound really exciting with kind of you and Paul's takeover and what you've got planned for the team, and it'll be a good one to watch throughout the course of the season. You do have Aberdeen next in the Cup. SWPL rivals are now up in the top league. What do you expect from them?
I think, you know, they're going to be a really tough side. I watched their progress last season and their journey up to the top flight, and I think, you know, they've made, you know, no secret of the fact that they see themselves as a club that can, you know, be up there and compete as well. You know, they've probably got a very similar type vision to us, that they don't want to be a team that's easily beaten. So I think we'll go there on Sunday and it'll be a really tough game. I think they've got, you know, a lot of young talented players. There's a strong vision both on and off the pitch as well, and I would expect to see that throughout the club. So it's a challenge that we'll embrace. It's certainly a game that we're looking forward to, and one that I mentioned that we realistically feel that we can go and produce a strong performance and hopefully come back home happy.
Right, well, all the best for that time. We look forward to seeing how you're getting on. In t-seusan, ga Zoe Ogilvie en een maar stuurige boord Obar-Dheathain. Heet voor een nacht en dreigchen, we gaan club een steekig keert dus ook blene jeekerash. Zoe wie geesje dood drie schasket, je hoek orde een toelachchen egal.
Bhún gadit, háis Zoe Ogilvie a hupper mar a chéad bhana-stiùiriche san t-seachdain-sa the ball-coise Obar-Dheathain.
It came totally out of the blue. I remember the call with Dave Cormack, the chairman, when he said that because one of our directors was retiring after almost 30 years on the board, and he said, you know, we have to appoint another board member, and he said we really would like that. We think it's about time that's a female board member. And I said I couldn't agree with you more, and I reeled off a few names of people that I thought would be good, and Dave said, oh, he said, we were actually thinking about you. So yeah, you had to pick me up off the floor after that. But yeah, incredibly honoured. And I actually didn't think about the making history part of it until later. But yeah, obviously that's an additional bonus.
Has Zoe mis buin Jevadani Hanish and an upper le art innive and the ball-coise na halappe.
But I think that, you know, diversity and inclusion is obviously at the top of the agenda at the moment across all organisations, not just football. So yeah, it's great to see that diversity is coming through on football boards. And I think with the rise of the women's game as well, although you know, that wasn't why I was appointed, that's only going to increase and only going to be beneficial for the game.
Chorób ball-coise dúna mar farste be Zoe, ach sé sinna sport ha inis t-seusan gomór.
I think if there's anyone watching this who knows me from a long time will know that I was actually brought up in a rugby family. So my dad and my brother played rugby. A lot of my really good friends played rugby for Aberdeen Grammar. I was a huge supporter of rugby. However, having said that, I was always a Dons fan. And I think with my daughter getting more involved, that's when I started to get more involved in football.
Hanni and Zoe Francesca colathi mas a dói oprach agus chud díchalach sa hai. Agus fai cútermocht of Obar-Dheathain and tese me yedig, nu de vinnig a t-seachdain SWPL ga and the league of a dudde of sprische.
She's incredibly driven and determined, and I think, you know, lockdown and then the SWPL 2 season for the women being being suspended for such a long period of time, you know, and her drive to keep fit during that time just showed, you know, how committed she is to the sport, and I think it paid off because she just had a fantastic second half of the season, and we're incredibly proud of her. You know, we can't underestimate the, you know, now that they're in the top flight, AFC women are in the top flight. They've done fantastically well to achieve back-to-back promotion, but they're going into a league where it's, you know, it is different. And I think that what is difficult for a lot of the teams in that league is that the sort of split between, you know, professional and still almost, you know, part-time or not professional. And, you know, it's up to Aberdeen Football Club to invest more in the women, but of course that requires us to find more revenues, to find more sponsorship, and I think you know, hopefully we'll find the right amount of sponsorship, and I think you know, as the profile of the game increases, and as I said earlier, as people are more supportive of that diversity and inclusion agenda, then hopefully we're going to be able to attract some sponsorship and really invest in AFC women.
A club ball-coise Obar-Dheathain idir bhí chud taighceáil do skippen an ban.
You know, 2-3 years ago, the club took the women totally under the football club brand. They're very much part of Aberdeen Football Club family now, and you know, you can see, for example, the goalie coach at Aberdeen is doing some work with Gail Gilmore and Iona Ballantyne in the AFC women's team. So there's now a lot of, you know, crossover. Gavin Levy at the club was incredibly supportive in the latter half of the season, you know, assisting the women. So there's a real desire within the club to fully integrate AFC women, and as I say, to invest in their success, because it's good for the women, it's good for the club.
Ha Cael Fata idir bhí ag Zoe colathi the Obar-Dheathain, a cuberliche club and the Cumas Maracachach son barach eith fichit bliana.
I mean, I've probably worked on and off with Aberdeen Football Club through my own business for over 20 years. So worked closely with Stuart Milne as chairman, and now with Dave Cormack. So I'm, you know, fully aware of the challenges that face the club, and what needs to be done from a PR and marketing perspective, and obviously, you know, I'll stick to what I know, and will hopefully bring, you know, my expertise and perhaps a fresh perspective to things. The club has made huge strides in its PR and marketing in recent years. I think that particularly during lockdown, we as a club, we really showed that we were at the heart of the community. So there was this recognition that whilst football was suspended, the club could do something positive in the community. So, you know, we developed the Still Standing Free campaign, and that campaign was about reaching out to our fans. So, you know, checking in, welfare calls. So we had a huge call centre behind the teams that was making sure fans were coping with lockdowns. Still Standing Free also involved food deliveries, and we supported, you know, thousands of families up and down the northeast. For me, one of the things that I'm most passionate about is that using the power and of the AFC brand or any football club brand and the passion for football, bringing together the club, it's the charitable trust and the fans can be a real force for good in the region, because, you know, football can tap into hard to reach audiences in a way that perhaps, you know, other organisations can't do.
Leanne, it's so lovely to hear from Zoe, and you can just see how much it means to her to be the first female director at Aberdeen, to kind of be making history, and you can tell she just totally loves the job too. Yeah,
you could feel that listening to the interview, and I think she's got one of those smiley faces as well, and really enthusiastic about the job that she has and the job that she's previously done at the club. So yeah, I think it's incredible. You know, it's I think a huge statement from Aberdeen. I think it's significant, but it's one that's required as well. I think moving forward in any sort of boardroom, you need to have that equal representation and diverse opinions, which I think Zoe will clearly offer with her experience and affiliation to the club, and the fact her daughter is there and playing as well. I'm sure she's got that emotional attachment as well, which is really important.
And do you think having, like you say, having that kind of equality across the board, do you think hopefully soon in the future that's something that will just be the norm, and actually it doesn't need to be such a huge statement, this is history, it'll just be, here's our director, and everyone's like, oh, fine.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, I think it's incredible that we're probably not at that stage already, because I think in any boardroom or business, any football club, you want to make the best decisions and the right decisions by everybody. So if you collectively have the same opinion and the same view, then I don't think you will ever arrive at the right destination. So I think you need to have those opinions, you need to have people there that will challenge other people's views and opinions, and by the looks of it, Aberdeen have found themselves the right women.
You can probably resonate with a lot that Zoe was saying at the end there about kind of pulling everything together for the football club, which I know you'll be experiencing just now, bringing everything together and trying to tap into all these different areas alongside playing the actual game.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm there. That's why I took up the opportunity, and to have the support of the club and Paul alongside me in the job that we do, and probably the responsibility that Paul has given myself, you know, and almost let me go in moments that I can go and express myself and try and put things in place that I feel offer real value to the club. And I've got the luxury of experiencing that as a player at different levels of the game, you know, both full-time, part-time and an amateur player. So I do understand how the players feel in that environment. So hopefully we can build something special.
And for Aberdeen, back-to-back promotion, fantastic as it is. Now they're in the top league, so much more, as you know, comes with that now. There is a lot more, just from the past couple of seasons, a lot more media attention on the top league. The game is growing, we're seeing it. There's still a long way to go, but it is happening. It's such an exciting season for everyone. How do you think Aberdeen will get on with that big change?
I think they'll embrace it. Aberdeen are a club that, even when I was coming through the youth pathway and when I first stepped into senior football, Aberdeen were a club that were in the top flight. The games were always fiery, they were always really competitive. Because of the location, they were able to hold on to a core group of players that came from that region. I think over time those players started to drift away and probably move more towards the central belt, and certain opportunities came their way. But I think now, with the structure that they have at the club, the fact that they've built that momentum in the back-to-back promotions, I think they can see that there's a real vision and potential, I think, for real success at the club. So, you know, I think that players will buy into that, I think supporters will buy into that, and I think with the extra exposure that the clubs will get this season and the league will get at various different outlets, I think there's a real potential to go and grow it and make it a really good thing. But hopefully they don't do too well coming up against Motherwell.
Yeah, we do need to remember you're on a different side. But I mean, for Aberdeen as well. Zoe was talking about the crossover from the men's game into the women's game, and even that coaching is invaluable, because Aberdeen are a successful club, so to have coaches from the team come over to the women's team, it's brilliant. Do you think that's something that you do want to see across the board a bit more?
Yeah, I think it's really important. You know, I think that one club message is really valuable within both sets of players, whether that's the men's side or the women's side. Throughout the youth academy at Motherwell, we've got the community trust in there as well. So I think to offer that message and to have those relationships cross over at some stage is really healthy, because I think we can all learn and grow with each other. I think we can learn from mistakes. I think we can learn from the positives within each club and how we achieve things. So for me, that's something that I think is really important. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to just achieve success and do well at what they do. So I think the more we can cross over and feed off of each other within the clubs, both men and women's sides, to grow. I think Zoe referred to it as a brand and the power within the club is really positive.
The other thing that Zoe touched on was the kind of professional and non-professional, the kind of full-time teams and the non-full-time teams. There's a lot of that in the top flight, and there is quite a big difference in terms of that. You've seen it moving from Glasgow City to Motherwell. Can you just talk us through what the changes are? How has your life changed from being with Glasgow City to now being with Motherwell?
I think it is just time. Time management is really important. I felt that earlier in my career as well, when I moved from Glasgow City to Notts County. Rest was probably the only thing that changed between those clubs. People think that you go to England and you become a better player, and it's because the resources are better and the talent pool is better. But in actual fact, it's just because you get to do what you need to focus on, which is go and train and play and rest and recover, eat well, sleep well, and repeat that process. I think at Glasgow City, the balance for me was almost there. I certainly was one of those players that had other commitments, so that at times could be challenging. And I think now at Motherwell, you've got a whole group of players that are effectively amateur players that do have either study commitments, work commitments, and a work-life balance with football that can be really challenging. So within that, we just try and create a mindset and a culture now that we need to accept that there's 3 clubs probably within the league that will be different from everybody else's preparations, but I think we need to try and be the best of the rest and how we combat the challenges that come with part-time football, and be mindful of that. Within sessions we would perhaps tailor the session plans and the training intensity around what the week looks like. If there's individuals that are going to miss sessions, we can accommodate that, but we can support them in other ways away from the club. And I think you need to be realistic and understand that what we are trying to build at Motherwell won't happen overnight. The same at Aberdeen. I'm sure they have a vision that at some point they would love to be a full-time club, but what I constantly remind the players is that to be successful doesn't mean to be full-time and professional. Is actually more about attitude and how you train and the quality within those sessions. If you immediately see it as a disadvantage, I don't think we'll ever be able to grow the sport.
Positive mental attitude, that's what we'll take. Thank you. Hanna perichen Shebahn Aherne agus Ruesha Littlejohn cótoch rechéile an an Ep2. Hij het beag glachach lí spórs ach an a Jifferdoin. Ein sin a cluiche der ball-coise internationte agus han sé eile a bruidhinn a game. Had in perichen cola agus barach íse do t-seusan.
A perichen Ruesha Littlejohn agus Shebahn Aherne iad bhí déanú inimagaibh pein an na ball-coise an ban. A thugadís agus léachant go maith t-seachdain-sa ans na béin achcha.
When I was younger, it used to literally just be my dad and a dog in the garden, and then I joined in playing football or trying to play football. But that was it. Apart from that, obviously, like some cousins and stuff would play, but no one played at like a high level or anything. Well, my dad will claim that he did, but he didn't. But we'll pretend that he did.
I was never interested in football, ever. I always remember some of the earliest memories would be going to the school's football games on the weekends to see Ruesha's football. And she would have been the only girl there at the time in the boys' teams. And I can remember that way back, but I never, ever, ever wanted to be part of that. I was a dancer, Irish dancer, didn't know how to kick a ball. Still cannot kick a ball, so it's not left me.
ha dria cluiche fata agus imiriteach iddi bhí Ruesha. Brúd a head bhí aiche van a bhaig le og.
I think as a kid you always wanted to be your job. You always believe that I'll be a footballer. I don't need to work because I'll just play football. Obviously I've had to work too. So but you almost believe it, but I don't think you would actually have like visualised how it's went or where the games went now. The games came like such a long way. It's obviously got a long way to go, but it's amazing like the opportunities out there for girls. There's so many options now. It's really nice to see. I feel like I'm not where I want to be. I probably wasted quite a few years not playing at maybe a high enough level. So now I feel like I'm sort of like trying to catch up and get back to that higher level, which, you know, I'm still in the international setup, which is great. And then obviously down here, WSL. I've not signed for a team this season yet, but hopefully it'll be sorted within the next 2 weeks. So I'm happy that I'm back here in this league. But obviously, you know, I've got myself a few targets and, you know, I'd like to get to where I think that I should be.
Gaf Shebahn slia go Obar-Dheathain radio agus haid pod-chraolaidh go mas sarabachal chruachach me yin ball-coise in van.
I've worked in radio since I was 15. I went in work experience to Radio Clyde, which was just down the road from me, and I was there for a number of years and always been interested in sports, always been interested in women's football over men's football because of, you know, when you're invested in somebody and you're close to somebody, that makes it easy for you to go and enjoy those games and love those games. And to see Ruesha now, I think the fittest and the most focused on the game that she's ever been at the ripe old age of 31. You know, it's been, for me, it was easy then to, now we're living together, just to have more of a focus in women's football. And in the first lockdown, we were all living here, and Ruesha's partner, Katie McCabe, lives with us, and I had been telling them for about a year and a half I want to do a women's football podcast, especially with, you know, the Arsenal girls on our doorstep. You know, the girls are here a lot. I've known some of them for years through Ruesha and the Scotland school set up, and I just wanted to do a women's football podcast because they've got the best fans, and I think what they don't have yet is that insight to women's footballers' lives. You know, they don't know how they live fully and how much of a struggle it is for them because they're not on the wages that you think most footballers would be on, and they're just really good girls. So I decided to do the first podcast with Katie. I couldn't believe it. I was sitting in the garden, it was a heat wave, and with working in radio, I never cared really. It was never my job to care about listeners. But when I did the podcast, the amount of listeners 24 hours on made me go, oh, right, but there's definitely an audience here. People care, people want to know more about them. And then I started to kind of get more from there. And now, especially with the lockdowns and how big sports has been, I love it. I love it. It's the most challenging and exciting path I've gone down. I think I'm really enjoying it.
I've still not been on the podcast.
She's hard to tie down. I just can't seem to access her. To be fair, with TalkSport, I've done women's football roundups on a Sunday when obviously the season was happening, and I did get a couple of like sound bites from Ruesha. Yeah, did get a couple, didn't I? And that went out on air, which is weird to think, but no, I actually would quite like to. I'd quite like to, because I think you've got a good story to tell. Ruesha doesn't like to go back over the past, but like you say, there's some years that she feels were wasted and has maybe slowed down her progress now, you know, and I think that's interesting, to be fair. And I think now I see her focused, I'm like, you deserve the opportunity now, you know. You'd have got it when you were younger, you still wouldn't have been here. You know, it takes all of these past mistakes and lessons to learn from and grow from, and it makes you where you are now. So I think that's important.
I've lived a good life.
Aunt gach griach gach gan spores, Ruesha agus Shebahn a cuide son uiters a Janos an Obar-Dheathain. Is she in this to find habits in the pandemic?
I think me for the future is short term, hopefully get signed up by a club, hopefully can remain in WSL or in one of the top leagues. So that's short term, and then obviously long term is hopefully the national team's going well and we can actually qualify for a major tournament. So that's my goals going forward right now.
My goals going forward, keep shouting at the front of the fan bus for women's football, and keep enjoying the balance at the moment, you know, just enjoying the balance of life and work and young kids and being healthy. I think that's all important at the end of the pandemic, to be fair. But yeah, just enjoying and being happy. I feel at this age it's the happiest I've ever been. And I think when you realise that in yourself, it's a good thing to just keep doing that. But, you know, and I'm looking forward to the return of the Women's Super League. Cannot wait. I've never been more excited for the return of a football league, so bring it on.
What a brilliant feature, Leanne, and two people who you do know well.
Yeah, really well, yeah.
How was your time, even kind of like playing with Ruesha?
Unbelievable, yeah, she is. Listening to her, actually, you almost feel for her in the sense that she doesn't appreciate how talented she is as an individual and what she is as well as a brilliant character, which you hear a lot of ex-players probably speak about now, how the game's changed and, you know, characters that are in the game are no longer, because you almost make players robotic at youth level and bring them through, and you kind of don't allow them to express themselves. And I think what Ruesha managed to do at various points of her career was express her character, and some people took to that and some people didn't, but certainly as her teammate and seeing how talented she was on the pitch and the character she was off the pitch, she was an unbelievable person to be around, and she really actually deserves to kind of be where she is now, because they're like a double act, you know, of course, and I've known Ruesha and Shebahn a long time, but I think they're both in a really good place, and it's really nice to see.
Really nice to hear from them as well. So like you just said, such a lovely feature. But just if we go back to the SWPL, I mean, so much has changed. We've spoken about it, kind of players coming and going, a lot of movement with management too. Unfortunately though, we have lost Forfar Farmington out of the top league. It was, would you say, I don't want to say a long time coming because they were doing really well at the start of last season, but could you have predicted that would have happened?
Personally, no. You know, maybe that's down to the fact that I wasn't keeping as close an eye on that situation as maybe I could have. But I think probably looking at Forfar, they're a team similar to Aberdeen, you know, that we've touched on, and they're a team that have been in the top flight for a long, long time. You know, I think they've been a club that have always had that community and family feel about them. I think any time you've gone there to play, you're always welcomed, you're always treated really nicely. I think the girls on the pitch have always carried themselves with a lot of pride and respect for the club and what they're about. So it's really sad to see that, you know, they've had to make the decision to drop down, that they couldn't fulfil this season's fixtures and whatnot. So I just hope that it allows them a chance to go and rebuild, you know, and focus on the things that they feel will benefit them, and we'll hopefully see them back in the top flight at some point in the not too distant future.
Because you're probably seeing it yourself now, just how difficult it is to maintain a quality team and field a team of good quality players to be playing in the top league now. Yeah,
and the recruitment aspect of it is probably the toughest, and I think it will only get tougher, you know, as time goes on, because I think money at certain clubs is there and you can tap into that. I think out with that, you're almost looking at homegrown talent, and teams are trying to cherry pick players from other clubs, so you don't really have the ability to go and strengthen from out with Scotland right now for most clubs. So everybody's fighting that battle that come the end of the season, you've got, you know, a long list of players that are only on a 1-year contract, and when that ends, those players can go and move on freely, you know, at no cost. And that's probably the aspect of the game that we really need to try and develop, you know, to make it more sustainable for clubs like Forfar, like Motherwell, like Aberdeen, that you can go and grow and develop players and have a long-term strategy and not just a season-by-season vision.
And hopefully a team we will see hopefully rebuild soon and see them get back on track. Just finally, before we close the show today, there's some really nice closing words from Ruesha and Shebahn. Shebahn kind of saying, do you know what, enjoy life and be happy. Is that kind of what you're taking away from all of this now?
100%, yeah. I think everything that you do in life, there has to be that enjoyment factor. I think, of course, there's got to be moments there that will challenge you and probably test you to your toughest, but I think ultimately, yeah, you've got to love it and enjoy it, and so far, that's what I'm managing to do.
Brilliant. Well, all the very best with Motherwell, and thank you very much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Sin son program na heiche noch gannach jaachcain bejúli fleeting callroom in studio. Mus fallh sin féimi sin mé nach go chuir Glasgow City a bhuanig an géimeachcha an Champions League na ban a chéalcha go bhfuil choramachcha háas féin chun an dàrna chuirst. Go mí ors nach chail Celtic an géimeachcha sin an eile Levanti ach Jan cínseach go bhfuil se bh lent an trí seascad YouTube agus han program a géirí gacin iPlayer a BBC. Hí sin sibh a nach jaachcain.